Speed is my motto, nothing's ever holding back.
Hello everyone and welcome back to iRacing and all things sim racing. This is the Lone Road iRacing podcast. My name is Guy Robertson and this week we are diving into one of motorsport's most fascinating stories. A racing series that once stood shoulder to shoulder with Formula One in Germany. A championship packed with factory giants, monster budgets, aggressive racing, and cars that look like touring cars but underneath the bonnet were basically fighter jets wearing headlights. We're talking DTM. And if you're newer to sim racing or newer to motorsport in general, you may only vaguely know the name. But for many racing fans, DTM used to feel like controlled violence at 116 miles per hour. It was prestige, it was drama. It was manufacturers going to war with carbon fibre clubs and turbocharged hammers. Then somehow it almost vanished. Not because fans stopped loving it, not because the racing became boring, but because modern motorsport sometimes has a habit of eating itself alive financially. And now, in one of the strangest twists in racing, DTM may actually be rebuilding itself through GT3 racing, through esports, and now through a brand new official DTM partnership with guess who? iRacing. So today we're asking what made DTM so special, what caused its downfall, is modern DTM still really DTM, and how successful will this new series become on iRacing? Then later in the show we have this week's iRacing Agony Uncle. We had a listener writing asking, am I racing the cars I love or just the cars everyone else tells me I should race? And honestly, that question may perfectly sum up the entire modern sim racing landscape. So go and grab a drink, settle into your rig, and let's head back to the glory days of DTM. What made DTM so special? To understand why this matters, you first need to understand how massive DTM once was. Because younger sim racers may see the name and think, yeah, okay, it's just another GT3 series. But older motorsport fans, they hear DTM and immediately picture giant wheel arches, flames out the exhaust, manufacturers fighting for pride, and touring cars driving like they absolutely hated each other, especially during the late 80s, the 90s and the 2000s. DTM wasn't trying to be a polite motorsport. It wasn't endurance racing, it wasn't strategy first racing, it wasn't even fuel saving. DTM was, you've got 40 minutes to settle this, drivers, good luck. And fans absolutely adored it. You had legendary manufacturers such as Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Audi, Opel, which is Vauxhall's European name, and Alfa Romeo during earlier periods. And these weren't customer teams quietly circulating, these were full factory operations, huge engineering groups with massive development wars. The cars looked vaguely like road-going saloons, but underneath they were barely related to anything you could buy at a dealership. Tiny silhouettes hiding prototype-level engineering, and that combination created something magical. because unlike Formula 1, fans still emotionally connected to the cars. A kid could watch a Mercedes DTM car at Hockenheimring and think, my dad drives a Mercedes. Even if the actual race car shared approximately 3 bolts and a badge with the road version. And the drivers, they were absolute animals. DTM became famous for its hard driving, sometimes controversial racing and sometimes barely legal racing. Drivers weren't politely waiting for opportunities, they were forcing them open with a crowbar. And that identity became the DNA of what DTM is or was. Aggression, prestige and factory all-out warfare. This next section talks about success when it becomes a problem. Now here's where the story starts becoming strangely familiar to modern motorsport, because DTM made the same mistakes many racing series actually make. It became addicted to escalation. Every year they wanted more aero, more development, more engineering, more technology, and overall more spending. And for a while that worked brilliantly. The cars became incredible. Seriously, the later Class 1 era of DTM cars were astonishing pieces of machinery. Turbocharged engines, wild aerodynamics, huge cornering grip, and massive braking capability. Some people describe them as formula cars wearing touring car bodywork. And here's the danger with highly advanced racing cars. Fans love them, engineers love them, drivers also love them. Accountants, they didn't like them so much, because eventually someone in a boardroom asks, why exactly are we spending millions to race a silhouette touring car? And once that question starts to be asked, motorsport gets nervous. The costs became enormous. Manufacturers were spending fortunes to remain competitive. And because the regulations were so specialised, the cars couldn't really be reused elsewhere. Unlike the GT3 cars today, a GT3 car can race in IMSA, Spa 24, Nürburgring, GT World Challenge, British GT, Asian GT and customer endurance events. DTM's Class 1 cars, well, they existed nearly almost entirely just for DTM, which meant the financial pressure became enormous. And eventually the manufacturers started walking away. And this became the beginning of the fall. So the tone of the story changes completely, because once major manufacturers began leaving a championship, motorsport can unravel frighteningly fast. Mercedes-Benz exited after 2018. That alone was seismic. Mercedes and DTM felt connected at the spine. Then Aston Martin arrived and disappeared almost instantly. Then came the devastating blow. Audi announced it was leaving after 2020. And suddenly, people weren't asking, can DTM recover? They were asking, will DTM even survive? Because without manufacturers, DTM loses its identity. This wasn't just another racing series. DTM was built around factory rivalry. Without factory war, what exactly was DTM supposed to be? And honestly, at that point, it looked finished. Completely finished. I remember many fans believing we were witnessing the death of one of Europe's greatest racing championships. And this is where the irony begins, because the very thing that saved DTM was the thing many traditionalists hated most, GT3. The next section is all around the GT3 transformation. Now, this is where opinions split harder than a rookie dive bomb into Turn 1 at Monza. Because when DTM is announced it would switch to GT3 regulations, some fans were relieved. Others were furious. Too many traditional DTM fans, GT3 represented a compromise. Old DTM was totally unique, special, and felt a little bit exotic. GT3, well, it was everywhere, and that's true. GT3 became the global solution to modern motorsport economics. And why was that? Basically because it worked. Manufacturers could build one car and race it almost everywhere. Customer teams could afford them. Balance of performance kept grids competitive and costs became manageable. GT3 wasn't just a rule set. It became motorsport's universal language. And DTM finally realised survive with GT3 or disappear trying to stay special. So in 2021, DTM reinvented itself, and honestly it's probably saved the DTM Championship, because suddenly grids started improving, manufacturers started to return, and customer teams re-entered. Racing became financially sustainable, and today's DTM grid is actually incredibly healthy. We've got Porsche, Lamborghini, Mercedes-AMG, BMW, McLaren, Ferrari and Ford returning with a Mustang GT3. And that's a genuinely exciting lineup. But there's still that question hanging over modern DTM. Is it truly DTM anymore? Or is it simply another GT3 championship wearing a famous badge? And honestly, that depends entirely on what you think DTM's identity really was. We're going to have a short break now to hear from the show's sponsor, Outlap. We'll be right back. We're having a quick pause here to mention our sponsor, Outlap, who are supporting the podcast. Outlap is built around the side of sim racing we don't talk about enough. The focus, the preparation, and mental work that happens long before the race actually starts. It's not about hype or loud designs, it's about process, patience, and showing up ready. Whether that's in the rig or stepping away from it. If that side of sim racing resonates with you, you'll find Outlap quietly ticking along in the background. I want to thank Outlap again for sponsoring the podcast, and the link to their sim racing apparel store is in the show notes. Welcome back to the second half of today's podcast, and I just want to thank Outlap again for supporting the podcast. Anybody that's looking for some sim racing apparel, check out the link in the show notes for the Outlap store. Let's get on with the show. So why does DTM still matter? Even now, DTM still carries weight, and that's important. because motorsport history matters emotionally. Some championships become bigger than the actual racing itself. DTM became a mythology. The name still means something. Even younger fans who never watched the old era still recognise DTM as a premium motorsport. And that matters massively for sim racing. Because sim racers don't just race cars. We race stories, we race identities, and guess what? We race fantasy. Nobody buys the Nürburgring because it's easy. Nobody races Bathurst because it's relaxing. We race them because they mean something. And DTM still means something, especially in Europe. Especially among older touring car fans as well. And especially among people who grew up watching factory battles between Audi and Mercedes. That emotional connection still exists. And that's exactly why iRacing partnering with DTM is generally quite clever. Because they're not just adding another GT3 series, they're borrowing decades of racing heritage. So that leads us brilliantly on to this question. Will DTM work on iRacing? Now, this is a really interesting question. With a new DTM series will it become successful on iRacing? The short answer really is initially, absolutely yes it will. The launch hype alone has already created pack grids. You've got GT3 popularity, official branding, real-world crossover, a European track appeal and recognisable manufacturers, and that combination is extremely strong. But let's think about the long term, and that's where things become a little bit more complicated. Because GT3 on iRacing is already incredibly crowded. You already have IMSA, VRS Sprint, GT Sprint, Endurance Series, special events and multi-class formats. So DTM risks becoming another place just to race GT3 cars. And that's the exact challenge modern real-world DTM faces too. Identity. So how does iRacing make it special? Simple really, by leaning into what DTM historically represented. Sprint aggression, short races, maximum pressure and elite competition. No fuel saving, no 3-hour strategy marathons and no patience economy. Just you have 30 minutes to survive. And honestly, that suits online racing beautifully, especially for drivers who don't always have time for endurance events. I actually think this series could become hugely popular with European evening races, competitive GT3 specialists, former touring car fans and people wanting intense sprint racing. But participation will depend heavily on scheduling and community identity. If it becomes GT Sprint Series number 7, basically DTM will fade. But if iRacing builds a proper DTM culture around it, this could become one of the best sprint series on the platform. We're going to be right back for this week's Agony Uncle. Don't go away. It's time for this week's iRacing Agony Uncle, and this one generally connects beautifully to today's topic. A listener has written in, "Hi Guy, I've been on iRacing for around a year and lately I feel like I'm losing motivation. When I started, I raced whatever looked fun. Touring cars, GT4s, Porsche Cup, old cars, basically anything. But now I feel pressured into only racing the popular series because I want stronger splits and better iRating opportunities. Everyone tells me to focus on GT3 because that's where the competition is. But honestly, I think I enjoyed iRacing more before I started caring about all of this. Am I racing the cars I love or just the cars everybody tells me I should race? And what a brilliant question. This question perfectly mirrors what happened to DTM itself, because DTM slowly stopped asking what makes us unique and started asking what makes us relevant. And I think many iRacers accidentally do the same thing. At first, we all race emotionally. We pick cars because they excite us. Then eventually, participation numbers matter, strength of field matters, iRating matters, and optimization matters. And slowly, the hobby becomes performance management. Now, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with wanting competition. But there is danger in turning iRacing into a second job. Because the day you stop loading into races excited and start loading in feeling obliged, something has shifted. One of the best things about iRacing is the variety. Some of the best racing on the surface happens in smaller communities. Touring cars, Radicals, Advanced Mazda, Lotus Series and Spec Racer Ford. Smaller groups often produce cleaner racing, friendlier communities, recognisable drivers and actual rivalries. And honestly, that's what many people are really searching for. They're looking for connection, not numbers, because iRating can quietly become addictive. You start chasing the number instead of the experience. And eventually you're racing cars you don't even love anymore because the participation is better. That's dangerous mentality, especially in sim racing where burnout is very real. So my advice, balance both worlds. Have your competitive series maybe on one night of the week, your progression series on another, and your high participation races, but always keep at least one series purely for joy. One car you race because it makes you smile. Because if you lose that, or any of us lose that, you've lost the entire reason we have started sim racing in the first place. So, listener that wrote in, I hope that explained it in the best way I can to give you some helpful advice. Now, viewers, listeners, let's get more questions for the iRacing Agony Uncle into the show's email, which is in the show notes below. Okay, time to close today's podcast. DTM nearly destroyed itself trying to become bigger, more advanced, more expensive and more important. But what race fans truly loved was never just the technology. It was the identity, the aggression, the sound, the rivalries and the raw emotion. And now through GT3 racing, through esports and through iRacing, DTM may finally be rediscovering what made it special in the first place. Not perfection, but identity. And maybe that's something all of us on iRacing should remember too. We should race what excites us. We should race what challenges us. And we should race what makes us grin like an idiot after a good battle. Because ultimately, this is why we're all here, right? To have fun. I want to thank everybody again for listening to this week's episode of the Lone Road iRacing podcast. Don't forget to share it with your friends, buddies and family to get more insights. And don't forget to send problems into the iRacing Agony Uncle. It's been a pleasure to do the podcast again with you this week. I've been Guy Robertson, and I'll see you on the track soon. And don't forget to say hello on the grid. Happy iRacing, and I'll see you next week.
Whatever it takes, we're racing, we're in the zone. Whatever it takes, we push hard, never alone. I'm in the cockpit, the engines roar, hear me now. We're racing circles, got a hustle made a vow. Chasing victory, it's all or nothing on the track. Speed is my motto, nothing's ever holding back. Whatever it takes.